Boldwood presents The Woman Who Met Herself, written by Laura Pearson and read by Julie Maisie. When two cars are involved in a head-on collision, you know the impact on both will be huge. That afterwards, whether they're written off or patched up, those cars will bear the imprint of one another. And it's the same with people. Ruth Waverley is 62 when it happens. She lives with her husband Nigel in a spacious house on the edge of Loughborough, and she has twin sons who have grown up and moved out. One has started a family of his own. She has a small business making cakes for birthdays and weddings in her large, light-filled kitchen. You might think she has it easy, but you'd be wrong. Debbie Jones is also 62. She lives alone. Her husband Richie died from a sudden heart attack a year ago. They hadn't had children. Debbie had moved to Loughborough on a whim for a new start. She'd taken a job going door to door, cajoling people into signing up to make regular donations to a mental health charity. You might think her life is a bit empty, but you'd be wrong about that too. Chapter 1. Ruth stands back, wipes her hands on her striped apron and admires her work. The spring sun is streaming through the window as if it's been specifically asked to highlight the wedding cake she's just finished decorating. It has 4 tiers, each a different flavour, with icing that has the barest hint of pink, raspberry macarons cascading down one side, and figures in the likeness of the bride, the groom and their dog standing on the top. She blows air out of her cheeks and then lurches forward to rescue a macaron that is sliding, sticking it firmly back in its place. She's learned the hard way that it is essential to let a cake settle for a while before announcing that it's ready for collection. Last-minute adjustments are common. Once she is happy, she'll go through her emails on the iPad, make a shopping list for ingredients. Tomorrow, she is doing a cake for a divorce party, her first, and the customer has said Ruth can do what she likes, as long as it features the band Queen, vodka and stilettos. Ruth had raised her eyebrows at that. There is no doubt that the requests are getting more and more outlandish. When she'd started doing this, God, was it 30 years ago? People had always just asked for a 3-tier wedding cake with white ribbon around each tier and a floral decoration on the top. Or for kids' birthdays, mums had asked for a swimming cake or a football cake or a teddy bear cake, and it had been pretty much up to her how she interpreted that. Now, a swimming cake is expected to be a pool complete with swimmers, a lifeguard, rubber rings and diving boards. If a kid likes Maltesers, it is no longer enough to make a chocolate cake and decorate it with them. No, you have to suspend a Maltesers bag several inches above the cake and have the little balls pouring out and onto the cake's surface. She can't really complain. She likes what she does, and the increasingly challenging requests certainly stop her from getting bored. She likes the fact that she can work from her own kitchen, that she isn't answerable to anyone. It's just the attitude of some of the customers she finds hard to take. The expectations. Ruth never meant to go into the baking business. Before she had her boys, she worked as a secretary. And after? Well, women didn't really work after back then. Not for the early years, at least. But baking was something she'd always enjoyed. And when she invited mum friends to celebrate the birthdays of her 2 sons, they heaped praise on the candle-filled cake she swept out of the kitchen with. One day, someone asked if she would make one for their child. Said she would, of course, pay, and it grew from there. Now she has a Facebook page, a rudimentary website, and she spends most of her evenings fielding WhatsApp messages from people who have mostly left it too late and want to pay a pittance. Ruth puts the kettle on and sends a message to Nigel. "Cup of tea?" She waits for the ticks to appear to show it's been delivered, but they don't turn blue, meaning he hasn't read the message. She'll just make him one anyway. Despite them having a good-sized house with 4 bedrooms and only the 2 of them living in it, Nigel had one of those garden office pods delivered during the first COVID lockdown, and now he works from the bottom of the garden 3 days a week. Sometimes Ruth forgets he's there. Sometimes, when he's in the actual office, she forgets he isn't in the garden. She's been known to take him a mug of tea, being careful not to slip on the wet slabs, only to find the pod locked up. On those occasions, she would cast her mind back to the morning, trying to remember him leaving the house. But she had an endless memory of mornings in which he did and didn't leave the house, and she found it hard to pinpoint which one was the latest. Ruth's sister, Kate, says that Ruth and Nigel have stopped seeing each other, that they are like wallpaper to one another at this point, and Ruth doesn't disagree. She makes the tea and puts some biscuits on a plate. She never used to buy biscuits, would always make them, cookies and shortbread, and when the boys were small, gingerbread men. But there isn't time now, with all these outlandish cakes to be made. She is pretty sure there's a request in her inbox waiting to be dealt with that involves making a pair of sponge roller skates. Ruth leaves her tea on the side and goes down to the end of the garden, where she is pretty sure she'll find Nigel frowning at his computer. She does. He looks up with an expression of confusion when she opens the door, as if he has no idea what tea and biscuits are, or that he has a wife, for that matter. "Thanks," he says, reaching to take her offerings from her. "It's fish pie for tea," she says. "Is 6 o'clock okay?" "Better make it 7. He turns back to the screen. Ruth stands there for a moment, thinking the exchange isn't quite finished, but it becomes apparent that it is, so she shuffles out and back up to the house for her own cup of tea. While she is waiting for it to cool, she fires off messages to both of her sons. To Max, "Hey love, how are you all? Hope you're getting some sleep. Send more pictures of gorgeous Grace when you have a minute." To Chris, "How did the big meeting go? Will we see you at the weekend?" She checks her phone a few times, but neither of them replies. There were times, when they were little, that she would have given anything for this. To sit, alone, in a quiet house with a cup of tea. It seemed like an impossible dream when they clung to her legs and her arms, and followed her into the toilet, and often crawled into her bed in the early hours. And now that she has all the peace and time alone she could possibly want, she finds that she misses them terribly. She misses them as chubby, mischievous toddlers, the way they planted their hands on her chest when they fell asleep on her. She misses them as awkward pre-teens, with front teeth that were too big for their mouths, and appetites she could never satisfy. She even misses them as sullen teenagers, who wouldn't keep their rooms tidy, and sometimes went days barely speaking to her, before seeking her out and telling her all the ins and outs of their latest dilemmas. Now, they are halfway through their 30s and caught up in their busy lives, and she suspects they rarely give her a thought. Chris is in London, with an impressive-sounding job in finance that she doesn't understand, and Max is closer to home, in Leicester, with a wife and new baby and a business and no spare time. Ruth opens up her iPad and starts scrolling through the latest baking messages, inquiries, confirmations, and the occasional change to a request. A couple of years ago, she got a message that read, "Sorry, asked for Peppa Pig, but as of this morning the pig is out and the Paw Patrol are in. Is it too late to switch?" And had answered through gritted teeth that it was fine, before taking the cake from the fridge and doing a reshaping job, using Peppa's nose to make Marshall's ears. And when she's convinced that she's as up-to-date as she needs to be, she goes into the lounge and turns on Netflix. She likes to watch reality TV shows about people falling in love. When things start to fall apart for the couples, she loses interest, abandons the series partway through. It is the beginning that she craves, when they have just met, and they are full of wonder and hope. Every now and then, Nigel suggests she retires. Some of their friends have taken the plunge, and they could afford to join them in their endless leisure. Nigel claims he's working until he's 65 and not a day more. But the thought of all those empty days scares Ruth a bit. She worries that she would fall down a reality TV rabbit hole and never come out. No, she will keep going as long as her hands are steady enough to decorate. She's been perfecting a brownie recipe, testing various iterations out on Nigel and her sister. She's thinking about expanding, if anything. There's a ping from her phone and her heart lifts, wondering which of her boys has been in touch. But it's her sister, Kate. With Mum, she says she hasn't seen you in weeks. Do you think we could just stop going and she wouldn't know the difference? Ruth visits their mum every Tuesday. Kate goes every Thursday. On Sundays, they take it in turns to drive and they go together, before dropping the car back and heading to the pub, where they talk about how shit it all is and encourage each other to drink more wine. She considers Kate's message. Would their mum know if they didn't go at all? She knows Kate's at least half joking, but there's temptation in it. The care home is nice enough, but it always smells faintly of urine and bleach, and if you turn your head when walking past other residents' rooms, you always wish you hadn't. When their dad died, their mum said to both of them that she would stay at home as long as she could, but she didn't expect either of them to move her into their homes. She was clear that she might have to go into a facility at some point if she survived longer than she was able to look after herself. Ruth and Kate had discussed it at length. Was it a double bluff? Was she angling for them to say that of course she could move in with them and they wouldn't hear of her going to a home? Silently, Ruth acknowledged that if their mother was going to live with one of them, it would have to be her. Kate's house was smaller and fuller. Her son James was still at home, and her daughter Connie was back and forth with her own 2 daughters in tow, depending on the current status of her marriage. They decided between them to take it at face value. And so, when their mum started showing signs of confusion, started thinking she was a young girl and the war wasn't long over, started occasionally wandering around the neighbourhood in her nightdress at all hours, they found the nicest place they could and moved her in. That was 3 years ago, and now it's hit and miss whether she knows who they are. Sometimes Ruth will hold her hand and tell her that she's her daughter, and her mum will look so baffled for a moment or two before relaxing and saying either her name or her sister's. They've agreed between them that as long as she thinks it's one of them, that's good enough, so they don't correct her. Ruth sends Kate a reply. Could we still go to the pub on Sundays if we stop visiting Mum? This is how they cope. They pretend, both of them, that it doesn't tear them apart that their mother is reduced to this shell of a person with a rapidly deteriorating brain. They make jokes and drink wine and help each other through it. By the time Ruth gets replies from her sons, she's stopped expecting them. Max's comes on the Saturday, 2 days after her message. Are you free to have Grace next Saturday? I have to work and Layla's hoping to see her uni friends. She doesn't reply immediately. She knows she's doing it as a sort of punishment, and she knows too that he won't notice. Grace is 7 months old and crawling. She's harder work than when she just slept and ate. And Nigel's bound to be useless, claiming he doesn't know what to do with babies, as if that's something that is inherent in women. There were long days with the boys when she had no idea what to do, when she sang every nursery rhyme she could think of before looking at the clock and seeing that a mere 7 minutes had passed. But Ruth knows she'll say yes. Eventually. She ends up holding out for almost an hour. She doesn't hear from Chris until Monday, which makes her question about whether they'll see him at the weekend rather redundant. He's single and lives alone and comes home for the weekend. For a good dinner, Ruth often thinks, about once a month. Work manic, maybe next weekend. She types out a reply, saying that it would be lovely to see him whenever he has the time, and then she deletes it without sending. Chapter 2. Less than a mile away, Debbie is leaving her rented terraced house and stepping out into the spring sun. It's the first day of her new job, and she is wearing a lanyard to prove she isn't a scammer and has a bundle of sign-up forms and leaflets in her bag. As she makes her way on foot to the area she's been asked to cover today to meet her new colleagues, she goes over the initial script in her head. Of course, we've all had times when we've struggled in life. We all deal with grief and stress and change, but some people find it harder to cope than others. What we're doing at Hopeful Horizons is trying to reach out to those people who are in trouble and give them a helping hand, or be there at the end of the phone when they come to us for help. She's personalised it, like they said to at the induction session. She knows she'll get a lot of doors slammed in her face, but hopefully she'll get some people signed up too. Debbie feels sure that this is the ideal job for her. She'll be out walking, getting a bit of exercise, and she'll be talking to people, which is her favourite thing to do. Obviously, the weather will play a part. It won't be quite so appealing to get out there on a blustery or rainy day, but she knows how to wrap herself up. What's that saying Richie used sometimes? No such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothes. Something like that. She has a good raincoat and a hat and gloves for winter. She'll be fine. The only thing she's worried about is someone breaking down and telling her they've lost someone to suicide. But if that happens, she will handle it in the same way she handled tears when she was working at the Citizens Advice Bureau. Sympathy and smiles. The street she's starting on is just another couple of minutes away when she sees a tree in full pink blossom and is struck by a memory of her and Richie on one of their walks. Him reaching up to pick a flower from the tree and tucking it into her hair. After she lost him, she found these memories hard. They were so vivid. She always had them, but it's different now he's gone. But she's learned over the past year to embrace them, to feel lucky to have had him, to have these lovely memories to draw on. Under her breath, she speaks to him. I'm doing okay, Richie. Don't you worry about me. And then she's at the corner of Queen's Road, where she's due to meet her teammates in, she checks her watch, 2 minutes. Not bad at all. Debbie prides herself on never being too early or too late. She doesn't want to waste her own time, and she doesn't want to waste anyone else's either. She looks down at her walking boots. No blisters for her. And when she looks up again, there are 2 men approaching from different directions. Both considerably taller than her, neither of them more than about 20. She can see their lanyards swinging as they walk. When they get close enough, she offers a cheery hello and they nod in response. It turns out they know each other, Matti and Jitu. They're both students at the university. Different courses, but they've seen each other in passing. They had a seminar together last term, and they know some of the same people. Debbie watches as they do a complicated-looking handshake and hopes they won't try to do it with her. They don't. Right then, she says, how shall we divide up the streets we've been given? Jitu looks at her a bit blankly, and Matti puffs on one of those vape things. Has she got this wrong? Have they been told something different to her? I mean, she goes on, pulling her phone out of her pocket to show them, I've been sent this map with streets highlighted in a different colour for each day. We have to cover this area between us today. She points, and Jitu looks at her phone screen before moving slightly away and shrugging. I'll take Queen's Road, he says. Matti comes closer and points to her screen, and Debbie notices that the smoke he's exhaling smells like pineapple, but artificial and sickly sweet. How strange. I'll do these streets and the roads that go off them, okay? Leaves you with the ones on the far side. Debbie's about to agree when she has another idea. Or, she says, we could just stick together, splitting the houses up as we go. Matti and Jitu look at each other and shrug, and that seems to be it, decided. They start on Queen's Road. It's a long, straight road with 1930s semis all along it. Debbie's surprised by how many people are home. Mums with young kids, retired people, and some who are clearly working from home. One man comes to the door in a shirt and tie paired with jogging bottoms. They take 3 houses at a time, then whoever finishes first goes to the next one up, and so on. Debbie knows she's working harder than the boys, but she doesn't really mind. They're surprisingly good company, opening up about their social lives and their studies. It's all going pretty well until late morning, when they've decided they'll break for lunch after the next 20 or so houses. They've signed up a few people, perhaps not as many as Debbie might have hoped, so she decides she'll really go for it on these last few before lunch. She marches up another paved path and raps confidently on the door, which is opened by a harassed-looking man in his 40s. "Hello," she says. "Do you have a minute to talk about mental health?" She knows from the way he folds his arms against his chest and tilts his head to one side that what follows isn't going to be good. "Do I have a minute to talk about mental health?" he repeats. Debbie nods and swallows. "That's right." "What would you like to talk about? My daughter's eating disorder or my son's self-harm?" Debbie feels her face fall. "I'm so sorry," she says. She knew this would happen sooner or later, but she'd expected sadness, possibly weeping. This guy is furious. "The thing is, it doesn't matter how sorry you are. It's not going to make any difference." "No," Debbie says, and she thinks about launching into her speech, about how Hopeful Horizons makes a huge difference to people like his children, but thinks better of it. He's closing the door when a woman appears behind him. She puts her hand on his shoulder, and Debbie feels like she's watching the most intimate of moments. She bows her head, prepares to walk away. "It's not her fault," she hears the woman say, and then Debbie looks up and they make eye contact. Her and this mother, who doesn't know how to help her children. "Sorry, it's just all quite raw." Debbie holds her hands up. "No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. I wish you all the best." She feels shaky when she gets to the end of the path, thinking of that woman saying sorry for her husband's bluntness, having the capacity to care about that in the middle of her own personal nightmare. When she sees Matty and Jitu coming down the paths either side of her at the same time, she turns from one to the other. "Could we break for lunch now? I just had a tough one and I feel a bit shaken." Jitu asks whether she's okay, and Debbie is warmed by the compassion of this near stranger. They agree to meet again in an hour, and Debbie makes her way to the park. She finds a bench and pulls out the packed lunch she made herself this morning: a cheese and pickle sandwich, an apple, a packet of hula hoops, and a bottle of water. She runs back through the morning in her head. The people who were kind, the ones who were rude, the ones who were dismissive, that last couple who were broken. And in between, snippets of conversation with Matty and Jitu. She has signed some people up for regular donations, and that makes her feel that she's doing something good, something worthy. Debbie's lost in her thoughts and doesn't notice the man approaching the bench until his dog is straining at the lead to greet her. She laughs. "Hello, who are you?" She looks up at the man, who looks to be in his 30s and has thick blonde hair and a good jawline. "Bonnie, cockapoo, mind if I sit here for a minute?" Debbie shakes her head and gives Bonnie a bit of a fuss. She's finished her lunch and is wondering what to do with the remaining half an hour of her break. The man beside her makes a phone call, and Bonnie races around as far as she can go on her lead while he tries to control her. When he's finished, Debbie clears her throat. "You seem busy," she says, and she seems like she wants a walk. And I'm not busy, that is, so I wonder whether I might take her for you, for 20 minutes or so. The man looks at her with a furrowed brow, as if he's trying to work out why she would offer this. He holds out her hand. "Pete." "Debbie," she says. "I'm not a dog owner now, but I have been in the past. I'd take good care of her." He must decide that she's harmless because he hands over the lead and pulls poo bags from his pocket, and before she knows it, Debbie is up and walking around, smiling at the way Bonnie stops to sniff everything and to greet every other dog. She has missed having a dog more than she realised. By the time she gets back to the bench, Bonnie's owner is on another call. She makes to hand the lead over, but he holds up a hand for her to wait, so she stands there for a minute while he wraps up his conversation. "Thanks," he says, "that was good of you. I come home from work at lunch to take her out, but—" He gestures at his mobile. "The calls don't stop." "No," she says, pretending she understands that kind of work. What kind of work is it, even? "She likes you," he says. "I like her." "Would you be interested in walking her sometimes? I'd pay you, of course. It's just, when we first got her, my boyfriend and I were both working from home because of COVID, and she got used to having us around. Now we're both back in the office." Debbie crouches down and puts her hands on either side of Bonnie's head. Bonnie licks her face. Could I have a think about it? I could take your number and... Yes, of course. Thank you. Debbie, was it? Debbie, she confirms. He takes her phone from her hand and inputs his number under Pete and Bonnie, and then his phone rings again and he grimaces at her, and she smiles and waves and walks away. When she gets back to Matty and Jitu, Debbie feels lighter, ready to go again. Matty uses his phone to direct them to a street that opens up into a warren of cul-de-sacs, telling them on the way about a lecturer who he accidentally poured coffee over in the uni cafe, and now he's been avoiding his seminars ever since. Bro, Jitu says, I'd have transferred to a different uni by now. It's not like I slept with his wife, Matty says. Debbie laughs, and it's only when she does that she realises there hasn't been much laughter in her life for a while. Since this move. Since she sold the house in Southampton she'd shared with Richie for 20 years and picked up her life and moved it over 150 miles to a place she'd never even visited because her mum lived there before she was born, had met Debbie's dad there. What was she looking for? Her mother was long dead and she'd never known her father. And still she felt this pull to the place they'd both come from. But since she made the move, she's been wondering whether it was the right thing. Things have felt bleak, unmanageable. But now she's got this job, and these boys are making her laugh, and she might have a dog to walk. It adds up. It's a start. Later, when she's eating a microwaved lasagna in front of the TV, she looks back over the day and concludes it's the best one she's had in a while. She reaches for her phone, sends Pete a text to say she'd love to walk Bonnie, letting him know her availability. Chapter 3. Hello, dear. Ruth steps into the room, takes her mum's hand. Hi, Mum. Joan tilts her head, her expression one of bewilderment. I don't have a daughter, she says. You must be confused. In the early days of this illness, which came in deceptively gently but soon showed its true colours and is now the cruelest thing Ruth has ever known, she argued endlessly with her mother about the things she got wrong. She would have told her, in this instance, that she did have a daughter. That she had two, in fact. She would have pulled out her phone and shown her mum photos, and it would all have been in vain. So now she goes along with her mum's beliefs about the world as best she can. She agrees, tries to gauge where in her life her mum is on this particular day, and she makes it work. Her mum never asks who she is, why she's there. She has never asked her to leave. Sometimes Ruth wishes she would. It would feel like a saving grace, in a way, if she had made the effort to do the visit. But her mum didn't want her there. She could spend a couple of hours looking around the shops or having coffee or going for a swim without feeling guilty, because it would be the hours that she'd already accounted for with a visit. Ruth goes to the window, pushes the curtains open wider. The room feels closed in, a bit stuffy. Her mum is sitting in the armchair, and Ruth perches on the edge of the bed. How are you? Oh, you don't need to worry about me. It's everyone else that's the problem. Ruth forces a smile, reaches for her bag. I've brought you some fruit and some flowers. Shall I take them through to the kitchen and find a vase? I'll do it. You don't know your way around. I've got 6 coming for dinner later. There's so much to do. Who's coming? Oh, colleagues of my husband's. He's in sales at a chocolate company, making quite an impression, I can tell you. He's invited his boss and someone from marketing, and their wives. I'm making a soufflé. Not for the first time, Ruth wonders whether her mum's caught in a particular day, whether this dinner party ever happened. She thinks it probably did. Her dad did indeed work in sales for a chocolate company for many years. That's where they met, and he stayed there through most of Ruth and Kate's childhoods. I've never made a soufflé, Ruth says. It's a lie, but she's learned that her mum likes to feel that she is helping, that she is imparting knowledge. The trick is to never open the oven while it's cooking. Ruth nods. It's true. She remembers times they spent together in the kitchen when she was a child, or when one of them catered at Christmas and the other helped out. Oven gloves and red cheeks darting around each other, Kate observing. As a child, with her arms folded across her chest, and as an adult, with a large glass of red wine in her hand. "What's for pudding?" Ruth asks. Her mum's eyes widen, and she reaches out and clutches Ruth's wrist. "Pudding? I've forgotten all about it. I'll have to go to the shops again." Ruth curses herself. But how could she have known? You could do your bread and butter pudding. Everyone loves that. "Everyone does love that," Joan says, and then she closes her eyes and almost instantaneously she is asleep. Ruth waits a couple of minutes and then gets up and goes in search of one of the carers. She finds a young woman with a name badge that reads Tala. Has Ruth seen her before? She isn't sure. They change so frequently, some of them employed by the home and others from an agency. It isn't easy work, and many of them don't last. "Do you have a minute?" Ruth asks. "I'm Joan's daughter." Tala breaks out into a broad smile. "Joan, she's such a character." English isn't her first language, and there's something sweet and charming about her pronunciation of character. Ruth imagines her hearing that phrase for the first time, then putting it into use. "Yes, I was wondering, is she eating well? She just looks so thin." Tala frowns. "I'm afraid I don't know that, but I can find out and send you an email if you leave an address with the office." Ruth nods and watches Tala hurry away. And it isn't Tala's fault, but she wants to scream, because she could probably wallpaper a small room with the notes she's left in the office, and no one ever comes back to her. They're overworked, underpaid. It isn't, she reminds herself, that they don't care. She goes back along the corridor and stands in her mum's doorway. She is still asleep in the chair, her mouth hanging open. Ruth feels a rush of affection. She goes over and gently presses a finger against her mum's chin to close her mouth. It falls open again, almost immediately. A thought comes. She could just leave. Usually she spends 2 hours here and comes away feeling drained and emotional. But there's no knowing how long her mum will sleep for, and she hasn't brought a book. She stands, picks up her bag and jacket, and she's at the door when the voice comes. "Could you get me a cup of tea?" Ruth spins as if caught, and her mum is looking wide-eyed, as if she's been awake the whole time. "Tea," she says, putting her bag down and hanging her jacket on the bed frame. "Of course." Later, Ruth makes 3 batches of cookies, Oreo, chocolate orange and salted caramel, for a party order, and then a lasagna she's not looking forward to eating. She finds pasta stodgy, would rather have a salad and a piece of fish, but it's a favourite of Nigel's, and although he never comments on what she makes for them, she can tell when he's not happy about it. As a compromise, she puts together a mixed salad to serve it with. Nigel comes in from the garden office just as she's opening the oven door to check on it. He rubs his arms. "Bit nippy down there." He often says this, but she's suggested getting a little heater and he always dismisses the idea, so she's at a loss. "This will be ready in 5 minutes, she says. "Great, I'll wash my hands." They sit opposite one another, the way they've sat for meals throughout their marriage, and Ruth tries to conjure up something to say while she serves them both salad and he pours the wine. "Did you see your mum?" he asks. "Yes." "She okay?" "So-so. She didn't know who I was, and she kept falling asleep." Nigel flashes her a look of sympathy. He understands. They went through this with his dad. That's how Ruth knows just how it's all going to go. She's exhausted by it. She has never said out loud that sometimes she wishes they would get the dreaded call to say that her mother has passed away. It's not the kind of thing you can say out loud, is it? He certainly never said it when it was his dad. But sometimes she thinks perhaps she could. She might. And then she backs out every single time. "Do you think we're doing the best we can for her?" she asks. Nigel puts down his fork, which is loaded with layers of pasta and meat.
I don't think we can have her here, if that's what you mean.
It isn't, but good to know, she thinks. It breaks my heart every time I go there. The staff turnover, the shabby furniture, the sad little dining room.
I think all care homes are like that, though, unless you pay an absolute fortune.
The plan is that Joan will pay for her own care herself. Her savings are dwindling at an astonishing rate, but they will sell her house when they need to, and that will cover her for a few more years. And Ruth prays she won't live with this disease for longer than that. But she knows she and Nigel could chip in if they wanted. They could make the difference, get her into a nicer place. Does Kate wonder why they don't? She can't afford to, but they can. Something holds her back from mentioning it. She knows Nigel will say that he wants all the money tied up in investments for the boys, but do the boys really need it? They both have good jobs. Whereas her mum is the one who's living out her final years in a place that smells of boiled fish and cheap cleaning products. Ruth doesn't even have a sense of how much money they have. Not really. Nigel's always been the main earner, and he's always looked after the finances too. She's involved in the day-to-day stuff, the bills and the food shopping and all of that, but it's him who looks after the bulk of it. What she doesn't say, but what is hanging in the air between them, is that both of his parents went to a much nicer care home than the one her mum is currently in. They didn't contribute to that either, though. His parents had a bigger house in a nicer area, and that was it. For a moment, Ruth wonders what kind of care home she and Nigel might end up in, what their boys would choose for them, how often they would visit. She would rather go the way her own dad did, fast, without warning, a stroke or a heart attack or even an accident of some kind. Anything but the slow waiting, her children having to estimate how many years she might last in order to make financial decisions. I might have a look around, she says, pushing the unwanted food around her plate.
You look, but I don't think you'll find anything significantly better at the same sort of price.
But when did they agree that they had to stick with the same sort of price? And also, what if she just found something that was slightly better? Isn't her mum worth that? The house phone rings and Nigel gets up to answer it. Ruth knows it will be a cold caller or one of their sons. For some reason, despite using their mobiles for everything, they always still call on the landline. She listens to what Nigel is saying, trying to work it out, but there is something wrong with Nigel's voice. Whatever this is, it isn't a run-of-the-mill sort of phone call. She feels a cold shiver of dread, the way she used to when they were in a playground and one of the boys climbed too high and was standing on a ledge looking down at her. Or when they started to go out until all hours, and she would check and find one of their bedrooms empty at 3 a.m. Nigel reappears, thrusts the phone at her, mouths, "Chris." "Hello, love," Ruth says. And he is crying. Ruth cannot remember the last time she heard him cry, with the possible exception of family funerals. When he was little, he cried freely, about not wanting to go home from the park, about not being able to keep one of the monkeys at the zoo, about missing his friend when he was away on holiday. When did that stop? She didn't notice it stop, and now he's this stoic man who gives very little away, and so why is he crying down the phone line from London? "What is it?" she asks. "What can I do?" That's the crux of being a mother, she thinks. What can I do? "I need to come home." He manages to get out. "Come," she says, "come right now. Do you need us to pick you up?" She avoids Nigel's eyes, knowing that he will be glaring at her suggestion that he, because let's face it, it would be him, might get in the car at this time and drive to London to rescue their adult child. "No," he says, "I'll get a train tomorrow. But you're sure it's okay? I might need to stay for a while." Ruth is surprised by this. She thought he was talking about a visit. He might need to stay for a while. As far as she's concerned, he can stay forever, but she can already imagine the ways in which Nigel and Chris will rub each other up the wrong way. The ways Chris will regress to his teenage years and start leaving mugs and plates and clothes all over his bedroom floor. Of course it's okay, she says. Don't be silly. This is your home. Will you be all right tonight? Can you tell me what's happened? Chris takes a deep, shaky breath, and Ruth wishes more than anything that she could pull him through the phone and into her arms. There was a time when she could fix anything for them, her boys, when she was the centre of their worlds. It's complicated. I'll tell you when I'm home. And he's gone. Nigel's eating his lasagna again, and Ruth wonders how he can, how it is that he isn't affected by their son's emotions in the same way she is. She remembers that phrase about only ever being as happy as your unhappiest child. Is that only mothers? He's coming home, she says. I gathered that. It sounds like it might be for a while, though. What do you mean, a while? I don't know, Nigel. He just said a while. Did he tell you anything about what's happened? He couldn't get his words out. There's a look of slight distaste on Nigel's face, and Ruth knows that he thinks men shouldn't cry. He's old-fashioned like that. Out of nowhere, she wonders what made her fall in love with him. What made her choose him, out of everyone, to have a family with? But if it hadn't been him, she wouldn't have Chris or Max, of course. I suppose we'll find out tomorrow. Ruth stands to take the plates through to the kitchen, finds herself leaning against the kitchen counter, with great sobs heaving in her chest, threatening to break out. Anything for pudding? Nigel calls from the dining room. Chapter 4. When Jitu asked Debbie to come and meet them for some drinks at the Students' Union, she laughed at first, but he kept asking, and eventually she said yes. She liked to say yes to things when she could, and it was fun. Now, a week later, Jitu is telling her that the doorman thought he recognised her. So then I said to him, "That was my good friend Debbie," Jitu says, slinging one arm around her. And then, "Do you have a problem with that?" And did he? Debbie asks. Have a problem, I mean. He thought you were someone else. We don't get many women of your age, pedigree, in the Students' Union. Anyway, what happened to you that night? Jitu turns to Matty, who's vaping. He blows the smoke away from them, but Debbie can still smell that it's some kind of citrus, lemon perhaps, or lime. Oh, Matty says, I got held up. There was a party. Debbie has learned that their lives are filled with nights like this, bars and parties and dancing. The conversation moves on to their workloads. Matty is studying maths, and Debbie has intuited that he's under a lot of pressure from his parents. When she asked him what he wanted to do with the degree at the end of it, he shrugged and said, I don't know, go back in time and take something interesting instead. Debbie knows how much it costs to go to university these days. It seems such an awful shame that he's studying something he doesn't want to, that might lead him to a career he won't enjoy. Jitu is more laid back. His degree is in business and economics, and he doesn't seem to take it very seriously or know what he's aiming to do with it. Debbie doesn't think there's anything wrong with that. He's just a kid. They both are. They've reached the street where they're starting work today, and Matty points to the house he's going to go to first. Jitu slaps him on the back and heads for the next house, and Debbie walks towards the one after that. This is a different kind of street to most of the ones they've covered so far. There are trees planted at regular intervals along the pavement, and the houses are all detached and have 3 stories. Debbie imagines that inside they're all sleek, minimalist kitchens and shiny tiled floors. She's never fancied a house like that. Not that it's ever been on the cards. But walking up the path, seeing the bay trees on either side of the matte grey front door and the big porch, Debbie can see the appeal. She reaches forward, rings the bell. Almost immediately she hears footsteps, but the door doesn't open for a while. Debbie imagines the person on the other side is looking for the keys. She goes over her opening lines in her head, though she knows them so well by now she doesn't need to. It's something she does when she's a bit nervous. Why is she nervous about this one? Is it intimidation about the big house? She doesn't think so. She doesn't get envious of things like this. things other people have that she doesn't, because life just goes different ways for different people, and she is more or less happy with how hers has turned out so far. At last, the click of the key and the door swings open, and Debbie opens her mouth to speak, but no words come out. Because the woman standing in front of her is, well, it's her. She's slimmer, in more expensive clothes with a better haircut. But the face, it's Debbie's face. She meets the woman's eyes and sees a bewilderment and panic that she suspects is reflected in her own. This can't be happening. It doesn't make any sense. As if in slow motion, Debbie notices that this woman, her double, is wearing a blue and white striped apron with a dusting of flour on it. Ankle-length navy trousers and a white shirt. Her feet are bare. The woman's feet, Debbie notices, are her feet. The second toe is slightly longer than the big toe, but this woman's toenails are painted coral, no chips, and Debbie knows that hers are bare. "What is this?" the woman asks in Debbie's voice. "Who are you?" Where to begin? With her name? Debbie has never been lost for words, has always thought that was a strange phrase. If anything, when she's upset or confused or surprised, she talks more. But nothing like this has ever happened in all of her 62 years, and besides, it's impossible. Why on earth would there be a woman living in Loughborough with her face and her body and her voice? How could there be? There's a cough, a cleared throat, and Debbie turns to see Jitu standing at the end of the path by the gate. She'd forgotten about Jitu. It's like her whole life has fallen away and she is stranded. "I'm heading up to the next one," he says. "Matty's still chatting away." Jitu makes a chatty mouth sign with one hand. "Is everything okay here?" He hasn't looked at the woman, Debbie thinks. If he looks, he'll see, and then he must do it because a hand flies to his mouth. "Oh, I didn't realise you had family here." "I don't," Debbie says, and she turns back to look at the woman, but she is backing away, slowly closing the door. "No, please. I can't. I don't understand," the woman says. And then she is gone. The door shut, Debbie on one side of it, and a woman who can only be her, sister? No, sisters don't have the exact same face. This woman is her identical twin. She knows it in her bones, even though she knows she's an only child. And it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have to, because it just is. "What the fuck?" Jitu whispers. Debbie is back down the path and she is shaking.